As you can see, my hairstyle has evolved rather than being created. And that's because I've been locked in for far too long, hence my turn into this form of blogging. Or should I say vlogging? Vlogging. I'm vlogging about the blog about the documentary that we cannot go and make. So anyway, so this is just to remind you that this is all about a journey through the native states of Malaysia, except they were called native states of Malaya, in 1879. Right, so it's a very important part of Malayan history and also British history, because this is the period when the British first took over the native states and turned it into a protectorate, which later on became the Federated States. Right, got that? Okay, so it's really important. Now then, half my audience are probably Malayan, and so, you will see various tropes, if that's the right word. I don't know, maybe it is. Anyway, various examples of British policy and attitude which have been taken up by the Malayan government right now. In fact, you'll see the same old nonsense turning up over and over and over again. And I'm shamefaced to say that I think the British were probably at fault for setting the whole piece of nonsense in motion. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, especially for the British audience who probably haven't a clue what I am talking about. And, well, get to learn your British history. Come on, British imperial history. It's really, the entire world is still fighting and squabbling over exactly the same things that the British were dealing with way, way, way back in the 19th century and the 18th century and possibly the 17th century. But we're now in the 21st century, and it's very surprising to find exactly the same stuff going on, particularly in Central Asia. I could tell you all about Central Asia, for that matter. Perhaps I should. Let's just say, pay the Turkman. Right, and you're wondering, what the hell's he talking about? Well, in Central Asia, there was a phrase that basically meant if you want to get on and do things in Central Asia, use all the trade routes and so on and so forth, you had to pay the Turkman. And if you wanted to raise an army or fight off other Turkmen, you paid the Turkman. And that was the rule, and it still is. In fact, you'll probably find that China's done a deal with the Taliban, and it's all to do with the vast reserves of gas that Turkmenistan is holding and just itching to start selling it to India and Pakistan. And of course, who better to, well, tax it all than the Taliban, who are earning a fortune out of the opium, but see what I mean. It's all there, and you're going to know nothing about this or hear anything about it, but just dig a little deeper, and you'll find there it is, same old stuff over and over again. So back to Malaya. Right, so where are we? We're following Isabella Bird's journey in Malaya, and she's in Malacca at the moment, and she's bored out of her mind, bored witless, and then finally Captain Hayward turns up, escorting Dato Klana. Now then, he has a long list of unpronounceable names, unpronounceable for myself, and names and honorifics. But basically, Dato Klana means the honourable chief of the clan. Klana. And he's got an arch-rival called Dato Banda, which I think is short for Bandahara, but it basically means a chief minister who's in charge of raising funds from, I don't know, from the town, the harbour, and so on and so forth. In fact, I think one of them dealt with getting money out of the river trade, another one dealt with getting money out of the goods that was landed on the land. Anyway, they hated each other because, quite frankly, they couldn't work out who was responsible for what, and that is, who should get the money, and they were squabbling over that. And just to make sure that you are really confused, the Yam Chuan of Negri Sandlan was their boss. ostensibly their boss, and he thought he should have the fair share of it, and in fact he should be parceling it out to them rather than them just taking it for granted and so on and so forth. Anyway, we'll go into that a bit more detail later on. So Dato Klana, who is running Sungei Ujong, he'd done a deal with the British, and now he had a British representative, a British advisor, who he ignored most of the time. But anyway, the British were advising him and backing his claims to the area, largely on the back of him selling mining rights to British companies. I say British companies, they were local companies. Mr. Velge from Malacca was heavily involved in it, a Dutch burgher living in Malacca. Right? You've got that. Okay. Right, now then, she's bored, and Dato Klana comes along and she's introduced to this guy who she calls the local the Sultan or the Raja. I'm not quite sure what term she used, but anyway, he's the boss of Sungei Ujong. He's an important man, and he's looked pretty ordinary. She was hoping that he would be all dressed up in his regalia and all that, but quite frankly, the local sultans didn't really go in for that. It was only when the British came that and started trying to dress them up and make them look all fancy, like a Oriental potentate should look, and so on. But they were quite down-to-earth people. Business was business, and he was in his business travelling clothes, and he was heading off on the Hajj to Mecca, and he was coming via Malacca, and I think he went off to Singapore to because there was a good Chinese company there that was running Hajj journeys there. It was a nice little earner from Singapore, and so he was going off on the Hajj. And he got talking with Isabella, and so he said, well, you know, go up to Seremban. You can have the keys to my house and stay there. His house wasn't a bad place to stay, actually. He was doing quite well. And so with that offer in mind, Captain Shaw, who was the governor of Malacca, thought, well, okay, because he didn't really want her to go up there because it was, you know, we'll talk about the troubles later on, but there was a lot of trouble there, and it was a little bit of a dangerous journey, to say the least. However, Captain Hayward, the chief superintendent of Sungei Ujong's police, would escort her, and that's something that she rather looked forward to. And strangely enough, he would send his daughters with her. Now then, his daughters, they spoke Malay. And once again, if you look at you know, there is this thing about the British colonialist who just turned up with a big stick and a white hat and just shouted at the natives until they did what he told them to do. It didn't really work that way. In fact, most of these people they studied Malay, and they were very interested in Malaysian culture and Malaysian literature, and you know, they had a thing about the Malays. It was something that they were terribly interested in, despite the fact that they squabbled and fought with them. They also did deals with them, and they found them a very amenable people to deal with. And strangely enough, in those days, despite Isabella's concerns about Islam, which she regarded as something that was holding the Malays back considerably, the British actually trusted the Muslims far more than they trusted Hindus. And they also trusted the Muslims far more than they trusted the Chinese. And the attitude to the Chinese at that time from the British point of view was pretty horrendous. You know, we would not appreciate it if we were Chinese and got confronted by the British disdain. Anyway, there were reasons behind that, which we will go into later on. But on the whole, the British felt somewhat superior to the Chinese, despite the fact that they regarded them as damned hard-working devils. But they rather liked the Malays. And curiously enough, the Straits Times in Singapore, not a newspaper that shirked from yelling at a few natives to be made an example of and hung as high as possible, actually were somewhat rather shocked by the treatment of the Malays by the British forces that had gone up to Seremban to rescue the British resident there. We'll talk about that tomorrow. But there was a lot of sympathy for the ordinary Malay living up the river, up and down the rivers, trying to make a living, having to pay off one guy, then pay off another guy, and have to then bear the brunt of the anger of the British Indian Army, really, and Arab mercenaries as well. It was a complex affair. Anyway, she gets this offer from Dato Klana. Dato Klana goes off on his Hajj, and him and most of his family die of dysentery whilst in Mecca. So being a sultan was, or a Dato Klana. Anyway, being a boss man in the Malaysian community didn't always have its upside. Let's just say the British may be dropping dead like flies. Well, so's everybody else. Anyway, so she goes off on this journey with Captain Hayward. Now, Captain Hayward is a typical roguish character that you find in these here parts. Well, in fact, in the 19th century, you found them all over the place. They were going off and shooting Red Indians in America, and they were going off and shooting Aborigines in Tasmania, and they were going off and, Captain Hayward, he shot crocodiles, but he shot pirates. Yes, we're not quite sure what, how many of them he bagged himself, but or who these people were. But let's just say that on this journey, which we'll talk about tomorrow, there was a little bit of a frism between him and some of the people they met. Let's just say a certain amount of tension was in the air. So he's one of the surprising things about the British Empire was how much of it was it simply happened. It didn't happen. The government were in fact dead against most of it, and it was people on the ground. These Englishmen kept going out there and doing things and just doing things. I say Englishmen. There was also Germans and the French were out there, and in fact they were in Malaya before the British were coming around. I think up in Selangor, the first plantation owner, so to speak, a European plantation owner, was a Frenchman who just turned up and set himself up as a little Raja there. Everybody wanted to be like Brooks, the White Raja, and they run their places like little fiefdoms. And he was just treated like another Raja in the area. I do believe. I can't remember his bloody name now, but I think he married a 16-year-old girl who went out there and slept with a rifle under a pillar or a revolver under a pillar all the time, and eventually they sold up and they went to Singapore and lived happily and richly ever after. But that's another story, and that's about the French. You see, the British were always terribly worried that the French would move in. Anyway, that was about the French, and it was nothing we can deal with here, because I'm talking about the British. So she goes off on her journey finally with it's raining thunder. She goes off on her journey with Captain Hayward. And what else do I want to bring up here? Oh yes, and that's the start of the adventure. Now we're going to go up the river tomorrow, and so it's going to be this side. Like, share, and hit the notification bell. Like, share, subscribe, like, share. There you are. I'm just going crazy. I can't read this. I can't see. I don't know what I'm doing. Right, so like, share, subscribe, and remember, this is go and read up on all this at lawrencegray.net/travel with a capital T. The link's down below. So, that's it. Right, next time, tomorrow. Don't forget. Bye.